There's a quiet rule in global finance that most people never think about. To move money across borders, you don't just need technology, you need permission. And for years, that permission has been the single biggest wall standing between Ripple and the European market. Something changed this week. You're watching Crusader, and what just happened in Luxembourg deserves a lot more attention than it's currently getting. Ripple has received preliminary approval for a crypto asset service provider license, known as a CASP, from Luxembourg's financial regulator, the CSSF. This is happening under the EU's MiCA framework, which is the regulatory structure governing crypto asset services across the entire European Economic Area. On its own, that sounds like routine regulatory news. But when you understand what this license actually does, the picture looks very different. Here's where things start getting interesting. Luxembourg has a unique position inside the European Union. Because it's an EU member state, any license obtained there doesn't just apply to Luxembourg, it becomes passportable. That word, passportable, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It means Ripple doesn't need to apply separately in Germany, France, Italy, Spain, or any of the other 27 countries inside the EEA. One approval in Luxembourg effectively unlocks 30 countries simultaneously, all of Europe, through a single regulatory door. That raises an entirely different question. Ripple already held an electronic money institution license in Luxembourg, a separate but related approval that covers payment tokens and stablecoins. Combined, the EMI license and the CASP license together give Ripple what the regulatory framework calls full MiCA compliance. That means the company can now offer regulated crypto asset services, stablecoin issuance, foreign exchange, crypto conversion, and end-to-end payment infrastructure across the entire European Economic Area, legally, compliantly, and at scale. That's not a small development, but that's only one part of the story. Consider what's happening with stablecoins in Europe right now. Tether, which has dominated the stablecoin market globally, doesn't meet MiCA's requirements for fiat-backed tokens. The regulatory framework demands stringent reserve standards, redemption rules, and disclosure requirements that favor heavily supervised issuers. As a result, roughly $17.5 billion worth of Tether is being removed from EU-regulated exchanges. That's a significant gap in the market, and Ripple's RLUSD, its dollar-denominated stablecoin, is structured precisely to meet MiCA standards. The timing here is not coincidental. Then another detail appeared. Of the roughly 1,200 companies operating in the EU crypto space, only around 210 had achieved full MiCA CASP licensing by mid-2026. That's approximately 17%, which means 83% of firms operating in this space are still working through compliance. As deadlines approach, businesses that were relying on non-compliant providers will need to find regulated alternatives quickly. Ripple, now fully MiCA compliant and able to offer an end-to-end suite of services under one integration, is likely to be the first call many institutions make. At first glance, this seems like a business story, but the implications for XRP are much bigger. Here's the mechanism worth understanding. Ripple Payments, the company's cross-border payment platform, connects institutions by facilitating collection, currency conversion, and final payout across different markets. Within that system, RLUSD can function as a stable settlement layer between transactions, while XRP can serve as the liquidity bridge between currencies, corridors, and even between different tokenized assets. As institutions across Europe begin tokenizing stocks, bonds, and derivatives, that bridge function becomes significantly more relevant. XRP doesn't need to be chosen by every transaction. It just needs to be positioned inside a system that processes enormous volume. And this is the part most people are missing. The two largest payment systems in Europe, Target2 and SEPA, process transactions in the order of hundreds of trillions of euros annually. That translates to several trillion euros moving through these rails every single day. Through the Interledger protocol, there are now pathways being developed for Ripple's infrastructure to connect with those systems, enabling further interoperability across European payments. If even a fraction of that flow touches infrastructure where XRP plays a role, the demand implications are substantial. And this isn't speculation. Ripple's UK managing director stated publicly that once the CASP license is fully approved, European banks, financial institutions, and fintechs will be able to access the full payment and stablecoin infrastructure through a single regulated integration. To understand why this matters further, we need to go one step further. The EU development doesn't exist in isolation. In the United Kingdom, Ripple secured both an electronic money institution license and a crypto asset registration from the Financial Conduct Authority earlier in 2026. The FCA is building toward a full crypto regulatory regime going live in 2027, and Ripple is already positioned on that register. RLUSD has also been confirmed as an approved currency on UK-based stablecoin FX platforms. Across Europe and the UK simultaneously, Ripple is locking in regulated access at exactly the moment institutions are deciding which providers to build relationships with for the long term. That raises a question that's harder to answer cleanly. There's a broader pattern here worth naming. Over the past several years, while much of the market's attention was focused on price action, meme coin cycles, and short-term narratives, Ripple was methodically building a regulatory infrastructure across dozens of jurisdictions. As of now, Ripple has active licensing or registration in the US, EU, UK, Singapore, UAE, and several other markets. The MiCA CASP in Luxembourg is the latest addition to that architecture. Regulatory clarity, as one analyst put it, isn't the enemy of crypto anymore, it's the filter. And Ripple has been preparing for that filter for years. Here's where the picture becomes genuinely difficult to predict. The CASP license is still preliminary. Conditions need to be fulfilled before it becomes final. The timeline for that finalization isn't public. Until it's complete, the full rollout of Ripple payments across the EEA remains pending. And MiCA compliance alone doesn't guarantee adoption. Institutions still need to choose Ripple over competitors, integrate the platform, and build volume. Regulatory permission is a prerequisite, not a guarantee of commercial success. But the structural positioning has shifted in a meaningful way. What existed before this week was a regulated company with ambitions in Europe, but no complete legal framework to operate there at scale. What exists now is a company with a pathway to full MiCA compliance, an existing EMI license, stablecoin infrastructure built for the regulatory environment, and a liquidity bridge asset already embedded in the design of the payment system. That combination didn't exist in this form before June 2026. The real story may not be what happened in Luxembourg this week. The real story is whether the institutions that are right now evaluating their options, banks, fintechs, and corporates, looking at a compliant payment infrastructure that works across 30 countries, decide to pick up the phone. And if they do, whether the volume that follows is large enough to make the regulatory architecture Ripple spent a decade building look like exactly the foundation it was designed to be.